Today's meditation will be led by the, I was going to say infamous, that's not the word I wanted. Incorrigible, the incredible David Bryant.
Morning. This is a poem by Mary Oliver, one of my favorite nature poets in the world. So go with her into these images, and for those of you who grew up north of the border, you may find this image important. I'd seen their hoofprints in the deep needles and knew they ended the long night under the pines, walking like two mute and beautiful women toward the deeper woods. So I got up in the dark and went there. They came slowly down the hill and looked at me sitting under the blue trees. Shyly, they stepped closer and stared from under their thick lashes and even nibbled some damp tassels of weeds. This is not a poem about a dream, though it could be. This is a poem about the world, a world that is ours, or could be. Finally, one of them, I swear it, would have come into my arms, but the other stamped sharp hoof in the pine needles like the tap of sanity. And they went off together through the trees. When I woke, I was alone. I was thinking. So this is how you swim inward. This is how you flow outward. This is how you pray. This is a poem about the world that is ours, or could be. Finally, one of them, I swear it, would have come to my arms, but the other stamped sharp hoof in the pine needles, like the tap of sanity. And they went off together through the woods. When I woke, I was alone. I was thinking. So this is how you swim inward. So this is how you flow outward. So this is how you pray.
Thank you, David. Today's presentation is entitled Celtic Faery Lore, and it will be presented by my friend and next door neighbor. So you better be nice to him. Gale Park will explore Celtic legends and lore about the fairy folk through storytelling and testimonials. And these fairies are not Disney confections with tiny wings and glitter wands. They are powerful beings of the natural world, who in the Celtic lands were highly respected and even feared. Belief in fairies' existence is not required to enjoy learning about the folklore surrounding them. Gale Park is a writer, artist, and mystic who has explored and practiced various forms of spirituality from an early age. Since 2000, she has studied shamanism and druidry with a special focus on ancient Celtic traditions. She recently returned to Mexico after living an off-grid cottage in the mountains of East Tennessee. She's working on a book about the Wheel of Time and the Seasons, which is basically a Celtic version of a Native American medicine wheel. My friend, Gale.
Is that right?
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you about all things Celtic, but particularly today about the stories about the fairies in the Celtic tradition. I tried to tailor this presentation so that you could enjoy it, whether or not you're a believer in fairies or such things. I'll tell you a little bit about who, what, and where the fairies are, focusing on the Celtic tradition and the fairies' relationship to us and the natural world. Is it falling in? My hair is pulling this thing. Or maybe it's my little cheeks. It might be. I'll mix in some stories of the fairies that have been carried down through generations of Celtic peoples. I want to open this talk with a short version of the origin story of the noblest of the fairies, what they call the Tuatha De Danann. And it's sometimes shortened to two a day, and I will use that off and on in order to shorten it a bit. So what I'd like for you to do right now is relax a little bit. Put both feet on the ground, if you will, if you don't mind, and perhaps put your hands, palms up on your lap, and take a few breaths and focus on your breathing. I'd like for you to close your eyes for a little while. I'm going to rattle for just a moment, and then I'm going to start into a story. And you can open your eyes again whenever you like. Long, long ago, when the earth was new, the land was hot and scarred with volcanoes. Fire bubbled up from the heart of the earth, and dark clouds of smoke and gas drifted across the parched land. And then, drip, 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 rain came from the great mother goddess down there. And then a torrent came from the heavens and cooled the land and made it fruitful. From the land there rose up a mighty oak tree whose roots went deep, deep into the earth and whose branches stretched into the very heavens. From this oak tree there fell two acorns. One was named Bridget, or Brige, and her name means the exalted one. The other one was called the Dada, the Doida, or the Dada. And his name means the good God. Bridget and the Dada settled in a place in a wide river valley. The river later became known as the Danube after the mother goddess. There they established 4 marvelous cities to bring up and to nurture the children of Danu. Each one had a special treasure. In the east was Phineas, and its treasure was the sword of Nuapa, which once drawn, none could escape. In the south was the spear of Lugh, and it always found its target. In the west was the city of Murias, and the great cauldron of the Dada, from which none went away unsatisfied. In the north, there was the city of Falius, and it had the stone of Fall, which would cry out when a true king stood upon it. Now, Bridget and the Dada nurtured the beautiful, marvelous, magical children of Danu, until the day came when they called them together into a circle and said, if the time has come for you to go forth and accomplish your mission, which is to nurture life, to bring order to chaos, and to bring wisdom to the people of the earth so that they might live lives of virtue and merit. We will send you to a green island in the west, and there you will encounter resistance from a people called the Faery who rule the island now. But we will give you the treasures of the 4 cities to take with you to help you prevail. So the children of Danu rose up in 4 columns of cloud and arrived on the island, or what we now call Ireland. And there a countryman was said to have spoken. We did not know then, under the sky of stars, whether they were of earth or of heaven. Their battles ensued, and the Tuatha defeated the Faery and drove them away. Generations passed peacefully until one day ships appeared on the horizon. It was the children of Gale, the Milesians, and they had come to take the island for their own. There were 2 major battles between the Tuatha and the Milesians, and the Milesians, with the help of their powerful druid, Ajijic, were able to defeat the Tuatha. It was decided at a peace conference that the island would be divided in half, and since the Milesians won, they got to choose first. They sent their druid, Ajijic, to choose, and when he was asked which part of the lands that he wanted for his people, he said, the top half. So that only left for the Tuatha the lands underground. Their brother, the Manannan, the sea god, came to collect them, and he led them to the hollow hills. And once they were inside, he shook his magic cloak of concealment to separate them from the outer world. Over time, the Tuatha were not seen by mortals very often, so they began to be forgotten. Their power and spiritual influence diminished in the outer world. And finally, with the advent of the Christian God, they almost disappeared. And they became known as the She, or the Faery folk. That story is a very abbreviated version of the origin story from an Irish manuscript called the Book of Invasions. Stories like this and poems and songs were passed down orally through seers and through families who had fairy contact over generations. And they're a large part of the body of the knowledge that we have about the ancient fairy faith. They called it the fairy faith back then. The Celts were largely an oral culture. So the Christian monks played a role in that they recorded many of these stories. And in some places you can see a little bit of a Christian influence where they might have just changed the story just a little, or maybe more than a little. We have no way of knowing. The old manuscripts and more recent folklore collections are main sources. The folklore collections, particularly Scottish minister Reverend Robert Kirk, who lived 1644 to 1692, American anthropologist W.Y. Evans Wentz, 1878 to 1965. The poet William Butler Yeats had a collection of fairy stories. And it was part of his nationalistic feeling. He wanted to preserve these traditions for Ireland. He lived 1839 to 1922, to give you an idea of the time slot we're talking about. And Lady Jane Wilde, who was Oscar Wilde's mother, collected a book of fairy stories as well. She lived in 1821 to 1896. I told you a bit about the Tuatha, the story, the origin story. They're examples of what might be called the old gods theory, which basically says that the deities of the old religion who weren't actually demonized were demoted into fairies, who were less threatening. Medieval Christians called the fairies fallen angels. They believed that when Satan and his angels left the heavens, the fairies didn't fall all the way. They just fell as far as earth and became known as fairies. There's a pygmy theory, saying that basically that the stories of the fairies are inspired by maybe some kind of a Neolithic, dwarfish, small race of people who perhaps were pushed into the remote regions by the invasion of Iron Age warriors. There's a scientific theory, which is, I had never heard of this before, but there's a thing called Williams syndrome, which causes people to look childlike, kind of. Full cheeks, large eyes, oval ears, little chins, small stature. But these people oftentimes are very empathic, and they have special difficulties, but they also have special gifts. There's a scientific theory. Some people, well, that's one I just did. Spirits of the dead. Some of the fairy mounds and hills are also tombs. So in the shamanic tradition, the fairies and the ancestors and the power animals all live in what's called the underworld, which is nothing like the Christian hell type of concept. So you can see how the fairies and the dead might be somewhat related. And in the shamanic tradition, you might relate the dead also to the connection with the earth elementals, because sooner or later, all of us end up either as ashes or as mulch, and it all goes into the earth. And there's the connection with the earth elementals, which I'll talk about in a minute. There's the possibility, some people think they're aliens. You know, you have the crop circles, and it's like the fairy circles, and all the stories. Pardon me, I had a little bit of thing this morning. The crop circles are like the fairy circles somewhat, maybe. And then you talk about fairy abductions, and you talk about alien abductions. So some people believe that that's their origin. And then there's the psychological origin theory, which is the viewpoint that fairies were just invented by primitive people who were seeking to explain the unexplainable. Today we're talking about the Celtic tradition, but there are fairy stories in many, I probably haven't researched everything, but there are the little people of the Cherokee, the Menehunis of Hawaii. The Yosemite Valley has red men, and the Abattoir of South Africa are all similar to fairies that we know of. You may have heard of elemental spirits, which humans sometimes consider to be the lower orders of the fairy world because they don't necessarily have pronounced human-like qualities. And they don't usually have individuality. They're agents of the life force that flows through the elements of earth, air, fire, and water. They shape the natural world and make it function. The concept of the four elements goes back as far as Plato, and probably much further in the shamanic traditions. Paracelsus, a Swiss-German philosopher, physician, botanist, astrologer, and many other things, personified the four elements by identifying each one with a king, who is the center of activity for each element. You could call them queens. It was a sexist age. Or, in my preference, you could see them as working as a pair. You could visualize them as somewhat like the queen of a beehive, where the queen is the focal point of the hive's energy. The earth element is identified with gnomes, which are small, earthy in nature and in color. Their job is to compose, manage, and give color to the physical forms of life on earth. Plants and trees and rocks and people and animals. The air element's king is Peralta. Sylphs are his workers. They can move freely since they aren't bound to any particular land formation, like trees or rocks. They can be tiny, or in the case of storm fairies, very large. They work with clouds and weather and cleansing and maintaining the Earth's atmosphere. They might look the most like you would think of the elementals as the Disney fairies, because they are sometimes visualized as ethereal beings with wings occasionally. They may reveal their presence in sudden breezes, in little whirlwinds, in unexplained fragrances, and finding of feathers. They can take the form of birds if they wish. King Jin, who's described as looking something like a genie, is the king of the fire elementals. They're found in any kind of fire, in sun-baked terrain as well, like deserts, or in the molten center of the earth. The fire elementals are represented as salamanders, tiny lizard-like beings of yellow and orange and red that you can see dancing in the fire. They're catalysts for change and transformation, since they are agents of both creation and destruction. The water elements, or elementals, are undines and ruled by King Nitsa. They live in coral caves on the sea, on lake shores, riverbanks, and marshes, and fountains, and wells. These beautiful, gentle spirits shimmer in sunlight, but they're rarely seen except clairvoyantly. They are essential to awakening empathy, healing, and purification. They heighten psychic and emotional feelings in us and often make themselves known in dreams. I'm going to give you a story of an Irish mystic's encounter with water elementals under a lake in West Ireland. And that's an example of how the collective consciousness of these beings is said to work. In the world under the waters, I saw an orange-colored king seated on a throne. And there seemed to be some fountain of mystical fire rising from under his throne. And he breathed this fire into himself as though it were his life. As I looked, I saw groups of pale beings, almost gray in color, coming down one side of the throne by the fire fountain. They placed their head and lips near the heart of the elemental king, and then as they touched him, they shot upward, pure and radiant, and passed on the other side as though they had received a new life from this chief of their world. Fairies in general are classified as nature spirits, and all of them are tied to nature in some way. Elementals tend to do the practical work of maintaining our physical surroundings, and the other supposedly higher classifications have more to do with magic and creativity. A mystic described to Evans Wentz, one of the fairy tale collectors I said earlier, orders of fairies called shining and opalescent. He said, there are many other worlds. The Tír na nÓg, which means the land of the ever young, of the ancient Irish, in which the races of the She exist, may be described as a radiant archetype of this world, though this definition does not at all express its psychic nature. In Tír na nÓg, one sees nothing save harmony and beautiful forms. There are other worlds in which we can see horrible shapes. The beings whom I call the She, I divide, as I have seen them, into two great classes, those which are shining and those which are opalescent, and seem lit up by a light within themselves. The shining beings appear to be lower in the hierarchies, the opalescent ones being more rarely seen, but appear to hold the positions of great chiefs or princes among the tribes of Dana. This mystic went on to describe the shining ones as human-sized mid-world beings and opalescent ones as heaven-world beings about 14 feet tall. He said in his vision, the opalescent beings, light seemed to stream out from them in every direction, and the effect on him was of extraordinary lightness, joyfulness, or ecstasy. In the Eastern traditions, these great beings have been called divas. They're credited with great powers in the natural world and are guardians of sacred sites. They can communicate telepathically with people. One notable example being in the gardens of Findhorn, where the divas taught the people there how to grow great vegetables, enormous vegetables, out of sandy soil. These fairies are She. This is from Reverend Robert Kirk. He said, these fairies are She, they call the good people, are said to be of middle stature between man and angel. That's where the daemons thought to be of old. Of intelligent, fluidous spirits and light-changeable bodies like those called astral. Somewhat in the nature of a condensed cloud and best seen in twilight. These bodies are so pliable to the subtlety of spirits that agitate them that they can make them appear or disappear at pleasure. W.B. Yeats had a simple classification system for fairies. He said one classification was the solitary fae, which could be things like leprechauns and cuckoos and banshee and bogies and brownies, and only the brownies are usually friendly with humans. As a matter of fact, if you treat them well, you can get them to come and finish your household chores at night. The hive fairies sound to me like elementals. They move together like bees or ants, and therefore those things are sacred to them. And they're organized with one mind with a queen at the center. The stationary fairies are local spirits, the genii loci, of a particular place or area. They may be associated with a stone formation or a body of water, for instance, and they don't move from that location. If you want to contact or work with the spirits of an area, this is a great one to start with, because they can open the doors to other spirits or not. The trooping fairies, sometimes known as the gentry, which the 2 a day would be classified among, move along fairy tracks, and they vary in size and in temperament. Many stories teach that it's unwise to interrupt them or obstruct their path. Here's a description of the gentry, the noble fairy folk, told to Evans Wentz by a mystic from County Sligo, Ireland. The folk are the grandest I have ever seen. They are far superior to us, and that is why they're called the gentry. They are not a working class, but a military aristocratic class, tall and noble appearing. They are a distinct race between our own and that of spirits, as they have told me. Their qualifications are tremendous. We could cut off half the human race, but would not, they said, for we are expecting salvation. That sounds like something a monk might have added, doesn't it? And I knew a man 3 or 4 years ago whom they struck down with paralysis. Their sight is so penetrating that I think that they could see through the earth. They have a silvery voice, quick and sweet. The music they play is most beautiful. They take the whole body and soul of young intellectual people who are interesting, transmuting the body to a body like their own. I asked them once if they ever died, and they said, no, we are always kept young. Once they take you and you taste food in their palace, you cannot come back. You are changed into one of them and live with them forever. They are able to appear in different forms. One once appeared to me and seemed only 4 feet high and stoutly built. He said, I'm bigger than I appear to you now. We can make the old young, the big small, the small big. One of their women told me all the secrets of my family. She said that my brother in Australia would travel much and suffer hardships, all of which came true. They foretold that my nephew, then about 2 years old, would become a great clergyman in America, which he is now. Besides the gentry, who are a distinct class, there are bad spirits and ghosts, which are nothing like them. My mother once saw a leprechaun beside a bush hammering. He disappeared before she could get to him, but he was also unlike the gentry. There are many other types of mystical creatures that are part of the fairy realm, like unicorns and phoenix and dryads and naiads and dragons and such. When I was researching different classifications of fairies, I noticed that none of the earlier Celtic ones mentioned elves. Seems like the elves were largely figures that arose from Scandinavian traditions and German lore. They were tall and beautiful and wise and had special powers comparable to the 2 a day, and much more like what you would see the elves in the Lord of the Rings stories than the Keebler elves. Apparently, elves didn't even appear in the traditions of the United Kingdom until the Elizabethan era. And in the Victorian era is where you got the adaptation of fairies into the little gauzy, winged, glitter wand beings. In Christmas elves were popularized actually in the United States in the late 1800s. So those are all fairly recent developments. Pardon me. Did you ever swallow? Not all creatures, I said that I think, are beautiful or benevolent. Giants, which in a lot of the Scandinavian lore are considered enemies of the gods, can represent an amplification of human energy. Trolls are large and territorial and fierce. I think the Hobbit portrayal probably is pretty close. Goblins are fierce and unfriendly to other fairies as they are to humans. They live underground, avoid bright light. They like to scare people. The pixies, particularly they have some interesting stories from Cornwall. They call them the piskies there, though. The pixies are small and childlike in appearance, and they like to play tricks. People would sometimes get lost in an area they were familiar with, and they would say they had been pisky led. Fairies are notorious for being unpredictable, and their standards and rules were different from ours. In the old tales, they were more objects of fear than cutesy winged cherubs. The country folk wouldn't go out at night, particularly at times when the fairies were known to be abroad, like Beltane and Samhain and Silver Solstice, for fear of being abducted or harmed in some way. In one really creepy story, this man who's kind of a drinker and carouser was on his way home from drinking and carousing, and he heard these people talking behind him and sounded something being dragged. And he made some smart comments, kind of smarted off to the fairies a little bit. And to teach him a lesson, apparently what they were dragging was a dead man. And they attached this dead man to his back. His arms around his neck and his legs around his waist. And they told him that he had to carry it until he found an acceptable place to bury it. Well, that dead man whispered in his ear what was acceptable and what was not. It turned out he had to walk 26 miles, they say, carrying this dead person before it would finally accept the burial place he found. And the story says that after that, he was a changed man. Fairies wouldn't throw water out the door without shouting first because they were afraid of splashing passing fairies and making them mad. They believed that fairies could turn milk sour, they could make a cow go dry, they could make livestock sick or unproductive, and they could also give people bad luck or ill health. I'm sure you've all heard of changelings. That was one of the things that people feared the most, is that they would wake up one morning and their healthy baby in the crib would all of a sudden be kind of a shriveled, unhealthy, ugly little thing, when they believed that the fairies had come and exchanged their sickly baby for the country person's healthy baby. One scary Scottish story, and there are a lot of scary Scottish stories, so I don't know if that's because of the dourness of the Scots or the harshness of the landscape, but they have Kelpies who would shapeshift into the form of a horse and lure people onto their back, and then they dash into the ocean and drown them. On the upside, fairies have a history of granting gifts. Music, prophecy, poetry, magic, healing, and joy, which they gave me. I have a story for you about a man who was granted the tongue that cannot lie, the gift that gives prophetic sight, utterance, and words of great power in poems and ballads and songs and other inspired orations. Thomas the Rhymer was originally a ballad, but since it's written in Old Scottish, I'll share it as a story. The title character was thought to be based on a real person, a Scottish laird and poet who was born in 1220 and lived in Warwickshire, Scotland. He is said to have become a great bard after a sojourn in the fairy realm. This is his story. One evening, Thomas was walking along the river when he heard behind him the tinkling of bells. And he turned to look, and he saw this marvelous woman on a white horse. And the horse's mane was braided with dozens of silver bells that tinkled when he walked. And on his back was this beautiful woman. She had on a green silk flowing dress. And she had on a green velvet cape with silver ornaments all over it. And in her hair there were jewels that sparkled, and on her forehead he was overcome. And he bowed low, and he said, "Mary, Queen of Heaven, I am hail. I have never seen the like of you." And the woman laughed and said, "I am a queen, but I am not Mary, the Queen of Heaven. I am the Queen of Fairyland." So Thomas said, "What seek you then with me?" She said, "I've come to visit you." And she spoke a spell. She said, "You will come with me for 7 years and serve me in fairyland." He could do nothing but obey. So he jumped up on the back of the horse, and they went for days. They rode and rode and rode, and they never saw the sun and the moon, and the only sound that they could hear was the roaring, distant roaring of the sea. Finally, they came out into a light place, and they could see a beautiful green country. and the horse stopped next to an apple tree. The queen of fairyland picked an apple, and she says, Thomas, with this apple, I'm going to give you a gift of true speech, which means you will be able to prophesy truly and speak truly and beautifully, and you will come to be known as True Thomas. So Thomas ate the apple, and he followed the queen to her palace in fairyland and lived there 7 years. But it seemed to him it's only 7 hours. The time came for him to come back to the upper world, and he became everything that she had told him. He became famous as an orator, as a prophet. Sometimes the things that he said came true in his lifetime, and sometimes not until much later. But eventually, he was standing on the lawn of a castle, talking to the lords and ladies, when once again he heard the jingle of bells. And he looked and he saw the Queen of Fairyland coming again on her white horse. And she came close to him and said, True Thomas, it is time. And Thomas turned to the lords and ladies he was speaking to, and he said, I bid you farewell, for I shall never return here again. And he jumped up on the back of a horse, and they rode away. And she crossed the ford of the river. And the lords jumped on their horses because they didn't know what was happening, and they went to pursue. And when they rode across the ford, there was nobody to be seen. And Thomas never came back to live in the upper world again. But sometimes some of the people thought that they saw him on the nights of the fairy raid, when the fairies sallied forth, riding on the back of a white stud behind the fairy queen. So he got the gift of true prophecy or true speech, but there are other gifts as well. Musical gifts come about when an individual happens on a celebration and joins in, or sits on a fairy mound. You often hear fairy music is described by those who've heard it as incredibly beautiful and ethereal. The 17th century blind harper Turlock O'Carolan supposedly slept down on the fairy fort one night, and he got music in his dreams, remembered it all, and some of it is still played to this day. A century later, an Irish piper came upon a fairy piper playing a hauntingly beautiful tune called Waraliana, and he was allowed to play it, but only 3 times in his life. So he kept to that agreement until he was in a really important national competition, and he decided to chance it, and he played it a 4th time to secure the win. He did win, but when they put the wreath on his head, he dropped dead on the stage. And the story says that the fairies punished him for breaking the agreement and for using their gift to further his own ambition. Their gifts of healing are often associated with herbal knowledge and crystal knowledge, also charms and incantations and rituals given by the fairies. There are a couple of stories here, but I'm running out of time, so I'm going to cut them a little bit shorter than I normally would. The physicians of Muthvi began in Wales with a young man who married a beautiful fairy woman, and some of you may have heard variations on this story. He told her she told him that if he ever hit her 3 times, that she would go back to the lake, back to the fairy world. And he tapped her as a gentle admonishment 3 times, and she left him. And she came only back as far as the shore occasionally to teach her 3 sons healing traditions. And that family of healers carried on for generations. There was another more cruel fairy healing family led by a man named Dion Ket. And he had a son named Miok and a daughter named Erden. And basically the way the story goes is that he killed his own son because his son was a better healer. And on his grave, the daughter went to visit him on his grave, and there were herbs planted in such a way that you could tell which herb applied to what part of the body. And she was laying them out on her cloak when her jealous father came by and shook the cloak. Fairies also can bestow magical gifts such as shape-shifting, second sight, cursing, blessing, and glamour. Glamour is the creation of illusions. But the stories that teach you if you deal with the fairies, you should be certain to understand the terms and be prepared to live by them. A friend of mine has a plaque in his garden, which I would love to have in life, that says, "Don't mess with the fairies." Good motto. William Kirk, one of the collectors of fairy lore that I referred to earlier, was believed to have been taken by the fairies at the end of his life. And I'd like to end this with a little poem that was written in his honor by a friend of his called Andrew Lang, and it's called The Fairy Minister. People of peace, a peaceful man, well worthy of your love was he, who while the roaring Garry ran red with the blood of Dundee, while coats were turning, crowns were falling, wandered along his valley still, and heard your mystic voices calling from fairy knoll and haunted hill. He heard, he saw, he knew too well the secrets of your fairy clan. You stole him from the haunted dale, who nevermore was seen of man, and now far from heaven and safe from hell, unknown of earth, he wanders free. Would that he might return and tell of his mysterious company. For we have tired the folk of peace, no more they tax our corn and oil. Their dances on the moorland cease, the brownie stits his wonted toil. No more shall any shepherd meet the ladies of the fairy clan, nor are their deathly kisses sweet on lips of any earthly man. And half I envy him, who now, clothed in her court's enchanted green, by moonlit loch or mountain's brow, is chaplain to the fairy queen.
Thank you. That was a delightful presentation.
Oh, thank you.
This is we have about 10 minutes for the fairies are here. Obviously, I was going to say. Did you see the butterfly?
No, I was...
Monarch butterfly that was going around?
Excellent.
There you go.
Winged ones.
So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and David or Sergio will come to you with a microphone. Here's our first question right here. Miss Margaret.
Well, I always found very fascinating the stones, the circle stones, which one we visited, and they would be called rolling stones or...
Dancing stones.
Yes, they moved by themselves, supposedly. Can you comment on those?
Well, I've never seen them do it, but but I can imagine it. They call Stonehenge, sometimes they call the dancing giants, I think. So I think that it's hard for us to really take in how something as solid and material as that can dance. But I think what you have to do is loosen your focus a little bit. It's not like that you have to. I'm actually, you're probably not going to believe this, but I'm a pretty practical person. But I'm able to loosen my hold on these things, you know, so that it's not like I'm looking for fairies everywhere I go, or thinking of them all the time, or anything like that. But if you can loosen your focus a little bit, it's like you can see into other dimensions. And I personally believe that there are many dimensions. I don't know if you get into quantum theory or something like that, you might be talking about parallel universes or string theory or something like that. And for me, fairies are one of the inhabitants. I don't know if probably they were seeing through kind of into another dimensional sort of a dance. Anybody else have anything?
No. I don't know if it's a question, but it strikes me that the beginning meditation of the Mary Oliver poem is so much like the Between the Worlds. The deer, were they there, were they not there? The fairies, it's poetry all. And I appreciate that aspect very much. Do you have any comments about relation to anything else about poetry? You've touched on that.
I thought that was an interesting thing that you just said to me. I was thinking about it. I thought, yeah, I believe that everything is connected. You know, it's not like we're separate from this marvelous tree, which you would do well to pay attention to. The poetry, I think, springs from an interior place and a kind of a connection to something larger, you know, the collective unconsciousness, the Akashic records, whatever you would like to call it. But I think of it as more of a connection that flows between worlds.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Some of us are Appalachian in background, and I'm wondering how much of your own experience growing up influenced your thinking today about Celtic lore.
I was always in love with nature. My first experience of God was in nature. You know, the teachings, my family didn't go to church much. My father wasn't fond of it. But when I first really became aware of the feeling or experience what God might be like, I was standing on a mountain looking down into this little valley, and it was like I could see into another level. And I was kind of blown away by that. I think I was 15 at the time or something like that. And from then on, I was a searcher. There's a lot of, you may know, in the South, and particularly in the mountains of East Tennessee, there's a lot of talk of otherworldly beings, ghosts, and, you know, I don't think I ever heard anybody in my childhood talk about fairies as such. But I was always aware of spirits and of things in other dimensions, and particularly as came from nature. I've read quite a bit about, well, I read some about some of the old traditions of the healers in the mountains and the storytellers and all that. And I think that probably did influence me, although I don't know if it was conscious. But I can't think of any particular time when I was younger. But when I was living in the mountains of East Tennessee this last time, when I went up to live in the off-the-grid cottage, I built the fairy altar there, and I had my lawnmower man complained all the time because my grass grew so much faster than my neighbors just a few 100 yards down the hill, something like that, and it just everything would just explode in growth. And so I think later I started studying shamanism in about the year 2000, and Druidry sometime after that. And when I started studying Druidry, I started tuning in more to that sort of thing. Although the first experience that I ever had when I really recognized fairies was in California. I bought a house and the yard was full of flowers. And one day I went outside and I was just aware of the movement of something in the flowers, and I could hear this kind of, it was a sound kind of like the sound of a whole bunch of people singing all at once. And it kind of, a little bit of a high pitch, not super high, but a little bit of a high pitch tune. And it just came to me that it was fairies. And that was the first time that I really identified anything as such. It was in California.
One quick question. I'm
Michael back there.
there are more now.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Can we take two more? Do we have time for two? Okay.
Thank you, Gale. Back in the early 70s, there was a popular book going around called The Coming of the Fairies.
Uh-huh.
Are you aware of it?
No, I have not heard of it.
Okay, well then
I may have to look it up.
But Arthur Conan Doyle wrote this book called The Coming of the Fairies, which was reportedly about a couple of preteen girls who had experiences with fairies somewhere in England, and they took photographs of them. The photographs were published in the book, and there was a great deal of discussion about the authenticity of the photographs. Were they fake or were they real? And from the book, it appeared that they were proven to be real photographs. So this went on for years, and there were discussions about it. And then, not all that long ago, a few years ago, I remember reading an article by Arthur Conan Doyle about him, who said they were in fact fake. So I've always wondered, were they, and was he just saving face by saying they were fake? But since you're not familiar with it, I was going to ask you if you had any particular opinion about it.
I have seen something similar to what you usually see in the photographs, like balls of light. That's what they usually come out looking like, the ones that I've seen. I was living in Sedona, Arizona, where I was doing readings and healing work and such, and I went out on the Bell Rock, which has a alien connection. And as I was coming back down from Bell Rock, I saw this bush, and it had all these globes of light on it. And they were not big, but they were glowing. And I went, whoa! And I thought, and I walked a little bit closer, and I was standing there looking at it, and there was a bush right here, and a little bird came and sat right there next to me. And you know, I feel like that was, you know, a visit.
One more question, and a quick response.
Quick response.
A quick response.
If I can.
I just want to say, because several years ago, The Mists of Avalon came out. It was a wonderful book. And much of it was really awakened me to recognition that there was a realm that was very close to us.
Mm-hmm.
But when the age of reason came along and we began to develop our minds, much of the reasoning, the need for scientific proof, that need to prove things disappears. And I've had many experiences in my life where, like, what was that? Oh, that was just that, you know. And my mind and my reason disappears the magic. And so, as you were saying, you know, when we loosen ourselves, I have found the miracle of my life enhanced by loosening, not having to reason with everything.
I think it's, I think of it like, you know, when someone speaks to me like I'm crazy or something like that, I just think, you know, you're just a little bit more limited than I am.